I'm Rebecca Mitchell, 34, standing in my parents' kitchen, as my sister Amanda's laughter cuts through the room. Her perfect life as a doctor with the perfect family makes my Air Force career seem worthless in their eyes. She just finished another story making me the punchline when the doorbell rang. Nobody knew what I had become these past years away. If only they could see me as I really am. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Trust me, you'll want to see what happens next. The thing about family is they see you as the person you were, not the person you've become. In the Mitchell family, the roles were assigned early. Amanda was the brilliant one, the achiever, the golden child. I was the troublemaker, the disappointment, the one who had potential, but never quite lived up to it. Amanda is 3 years older than me. From childhood she excelled at everything. Perfect grades, perfect friends, perfect extracurriculars. She was class president valedictorian, and still found time to volunteer at the local hospital. My parents Eleanor and James Mitchell beamed with pride at every award ceremony and graduation. Their firstborn was everything they had hoped for. Then there was me. I wasn't a bad kid, just different. While Amanda was organizing study groups, I was climbing trees and exploring the woods behind our Connecticut suburban home. When she joined debate club, I joined track and field. My grades were good but not spectacular. I preferred hands-on learning to textbooks. This didn't fit my parents' definition of success. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. Every report card, every parent-teacher conference, every family dinner seemed to circle back to this question. My achievements were measured against Amanda's, and invariably found wanting. After high school, Amanda went to an Ivy League school, and then to medical school, exactly as expected. I went to a state university on a partial ROTC scholarship, which my parents viewed as a step down. The military. My mother had nearly dropped her coffee cup when I told them, "Rebecca, that's for people who don't have other options." My father had been more direct. "What a waste of your education. You could do so much more." What they didn't understand was that I had found my calling. The structure, the purpose, the camaraderie of military life spoke to something deep inside me. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. After college, Amanda married Richard Turner, a successful corporate attorney from a family similar to ours. They had their wedding at the country club where my parents were members. 800 guests, ice sculptures, and a 12-piece orchestra. My parents spent more on that single day than they had on my entire college education. I couldn't attend the wedding. I was in basic training beginning my career as an Air Force officer. My absence was noted, and added to the list of ways I had disappointed the family. Over the next decade, our lives diverged even further. Amanda established a successful medical practice, had 2 perfect children, and bought a house 3 blocks from our parents. She was a fixture at family gatherings, charity events, and country club functions. Her life was an extension of the world our parents valued. Meanwhile, I was deployed overseas, moving from base to base, rising through the ranks. My work was often classified, my accomplishments necessarily private. To my family, my life was a mystery, and they showed little interest in solving it. When I made captain, I called my parents. My mother listened politely for 2 minutes before changing the subject to Amanda's daughter winning a regional spelling bee. When I was promoted to major, I sent them a letter with a photo of the ceremony. They never mentioned receiving it. Last year, when I reached lieutenant colonel and took command of a specialized unit, I stopped trying to share my accomplishments with them. My relationship with Amanda grew more strained with time. Her occasional texts and calls were filled with thinly veiled condescension. "Still playing soldier?" she would ask. Or, "When are you going to get a real job and settle down?" She seemed to take my career choice as a personal affront, as if my different path somehow challenged the validity of hers. Each time I visited home, which became increasingly rare, she found ways to diminish my experiences in front of the family. Despite all this, some small part of me still craved their approval. That childhood desire to be seen, to be valued, never quite went away. So when my mother called to insist I attend this year's family reunion, coinciding with my parents' 40th anniversary, I reluctantly agreed. I had just returned from a classified operation that had prevented an international diplomatic crisis. My team had worked for months on the mission, and its successful completion had earned commendations from the highest levels of government. I was proud of what we had accomplished, even if I couldn't share the details. As I packed for the trip home, I wondered if this time might be different. Maybe this time they would see me for who I had become, not who they thought I should be. How wrong I was. The Mitchell family home hadn't changed much in the 15 years since I had lived there. The colonial-style house, with its manicured lawn and carefully tended garden beds, still projected the image of tasteful affluence my parents so carefully cultivated. As I pulled my rental car into the circular driveway, I noted the row of luxury vehicles already parked there. The gang was all here. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my duffel bag from the passenger seat and headed for the front door. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open to reveal my mother Eleanor impeccably dressed in a cream-colored pantsuit, her silver hair styled in a perfect bob. "Rebecca, you're finally here," she said, giving me a brief hug that felt more like a social obligation than a greeting between mother and daughter. Her eyes scanned my appearance, taking in my simple jeans and button-down shirt. I could see the disapproval in her gaze. "Hi, Mom. It's good to see you. I meant it despite everything. Everyone's out back. Your father's grilling. You remember how he loves to show off his grilling skills at these gatherings?" She turned and led the way through the house, not waiting to see if I followed. The backyard was filled with relatives I hadn't seen in years. Aunt Margaret and Uncle Robert were deep in conversation with my father by the grill. Cousins Stephanie, Jason, and Sarah were scattered around the expansive patio. And there, holding court at the center of it all, was Amanda. She looked exactly as I expected. Designer sundress, perfect makeup, not a hair out of place. Her husband Richard stood beside her, one hand resting possessively on her lower back. Their children, a boy and girl, who looked about 10 and 8, were playing with other kids near the pool. Amanda spotted me immediately. Her smile widened in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, look who decided to join the land of the living," she called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The mysterious soldier returns." Heads turned in my direction. I forced a smile and walked toward her, acutely aware of the curious gazes following me. "Good to see you too, Amanda," I said, keeping my tone light. "Hi, Richard." Richard, to his credit, seemed genuinely pleased to see me. "Rebecca, great to have you here." He stepped forward to give me a warm handshake. "I want to hear all about what you've been up to. Your mom mentioned you're pretty high up the chain of command now." Before I could answer, Amanda laughed. "Oh, Richard, you know the military. Everyone's high up in something or other. All those titles and ribbons. It's like Boy Scouts for adults." I felt the familiar sting of her dismissal, but kept my expression neutral. "Actually, I recently completed a pretty significant mission. Can't share the details, of course, but it was important work." "Of course it was," Amanda said with an exaggerated wink. "Very hush-hush, very classified, just like all your important work." Our father approached, spatula in hand. "Rebecca, glad you could make it." He gave me an awkward side hug, careful not to get his kiss the cook apron against my clothes. "Wouldn't miss it, Dad. Happy anniversary." He nodded, then immediately turned to Amanda. "Your mother says the Hendersons might stop by later. Did you treat their son's appendicitis last month?" And just like that, I was forgotten. As they launched into a discussion about Amanda's medical practice, I drifted away to greet other family members. Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother, was one of the few relatives who seemed genuinely interested in my life. He had served in the army in his youth, and always had questions about my career. "There's my favorite niece," he said, giving me a bear hug. "Lieutenant Colonel. Now I hear. That's impressive, Rebecca." "Thanks, Uncle Robert. It's been a challenging but rewarding path." "I bet. You know your grandpa would be proud. He always had a soft spot for those who serve." Our grandfather had fought in Korea, earning a Purple Heart. He had been the one person in the family who encouraged my military aspirations before he passed away during my senior year of high school. As Uncle Robert and I caught up, I noticed Cousin Stephanie hovering nearby, clearly wanting to join the conversation. She was Amanda's age, but couldn't be more different from my sister. Where Amanda was polished and calculated, Stephanie was warm and genuine. "Rebecca, I've missed you," she said finally, stepping forward to hug me. "Tell me everything. Where are you stationed now? Are you seeing anyone? When was the last time you were actually home for more than 2 days?" Her barrage of questions made me laugh, the first real laugh since I'd arrived. "One at a time, Steph. I'm based in Virginia when I'm not deployed. No, not seeing anyone seriously. Work keeps me pretty busy, and it's been about 2 years since I was home for any significant time." 2 years. That's criminal. But I get it. I follow all those military news channels. I bet you're doing all kinds of impressive things you can't tell us about. Before I could respond, I heard Amanda's voice behind me. "Oh, Steph, don't encourage her. Next she'll be telling us she's personally responsible for world peace." She handed me a glass of white wine. "Here, loosen up a bit." "You're so stiff." Must be all that standing at attention. I accepted the wine but didn't drink it. I needed to stay sharp around Amanda. "Actually, I was just telling Stephanie about being based in Virginia." "Virginia," Amanda repeated. "Such an exciting life you lead, bouncing around from one military base to another, never settling down, never building anything permanent." The implication was clear: her life had value, substance, permanence. Mine was transient, insubstantial. I was saved from responding by my mother, announcing that dinner would be served in 15 minutes. As people began moving toward the patio dining area, I excused myself to take my bag upstairs to my old bedroom. The room was exactly as I had left it for college, frozen in time, like a museum exhibit of my teenage years. Track trophies on the shelf, a few faded posters on the walls, my high school graduation photo on the dresser. It was as if my parents had preserved this space as a reminder of when my life still fit their expectations. I sat on the edge of the bed and took a moment to center myself. The family dynamics were playing out exactly as I had feared. Amanda was already in rare form, and we hadn't even made it to dinner yet. A memory surfaced unbidden. I was 16 and had just won a regional track competition. When I told my parents, my father had nodded absently and said, "That's nice. Did you hear Amanda got accepted to her first-choice medical school?" My accomplishment had been dismissed in favor of celebrating my sister. It was a pattern that had repeated throughout our lives. Straightening my shoulders, I stood up. I was no longer that 16-year-old desperate for validation. I was Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Mitchell, decorated officer and unit commander. I had led teams through situations most people couldn't imagine. I had made decisions that saved lives. I didn't need my family's approval to know my worth. With that thought firmly in mind, I headed back downstairs to face the dinner that awaited. The Mitchell family dining room was a showcase of traditional elegance. The mahogany table extended to its full length for the occasion gleamed under the light of the crystal chandelier. Fine china, silver flatware, and crystal glasses were arranged with precision at each place setting. It was the kind of formal dining experience I had long ago left behind for military mess halls and quick meals between briefings. I found my assigned seat unsurprised to discover I was placed between Cousin Jason, who was engrossed in his phone, and Aunt Margaret, who had always treated me with benign indifference. Amanda naturally sat at the head of the table near our parents, positioned as the co-guest of honor at what was ostensibly their anniversary celebration. The first course, a delicate salad with goat cheese and candied walnuts, was served as conversation flowed around the table. Most of it centered on local gossip, the accomplishments of various children and grandchildren, and reminiscences about family events I had missed. "Remember Emily Roberts' wedding last summer?" Amanda was saying. "The one Rebecca couldn't attend because of some training exercise." She made air quotes around the words, implying disbelief. "It was absolutely magical. Emily's father flew in a pastry chef from Paris for the cake. My mother nodded enthusiastically. The whole affair was just stunning. A shame you had to miss it, Rebecca. What I had actually been doing that weekend was leading a covert extraction of an intelligence asset from a hostile region, an operation that had required months of planning and had saved the life of someone who had provided crucial information to the United States. But of course I couldn't say that. I'm sure it was lovely, I said, instead taking a sip of water. Speaking of missing things, Amanda continued her voice, taking on the tone she used when setting up a story at someone else's expense. Remember when Rebecca missed her own graduation party because she fell asleep in the treehouse? Several relatives chuckled, settling in for what was clearly a familiar story. She was 18 years old, Amanda went on, and while all her friends and family were waiting to celebrate her, she was napping like a 5-year-old in that rickety old treehouse Dad built. What Amanda conveniently left out was that I had been exhausted from working night shifts at a local diner to save money for college, something she had never had to do thanks to our parents fully funding her education. Always was a bit of an odd duck, my father added, with a fond but dismissive smile. Never quite got the hang of proper social occasions. I felt a flash of irritation but pushed it down. I was working double shifts that week, I said mildly. But yes, not my finest moment. Oh, that reminds me, Amanda said, not acknowledging my explanation. Did I tell you all about Rebecca's prom disaster? She actually thought Jack Phillips was going to ask her when everyone knew he was interested in Melissa Simmons. And so it continued through the soup course and into the main entree. Amanda dredged up every embarrassing story, every failure, every awkward teenage moment. She could recall, all presented as charming anecdotes, but clearly designed to diminish me in front of the family. After a particularly humiliating story about my first attempt at driving Uncle Robert, attempted to change the subject. So, Rebecca, I hear your unit was involved in something pretty significant recently. Made the national news, though they didn't name names, of course. This was my opening. Yes, we were. It was a complex operation that required coordination across multiple agencies and branches. I led the Air Force component. For a moment I had the table's attention. Even Jason looked up from his phone. What exactly do you do in the Air Force? Cousin Sarah asked. Are you a pilot? I'm a special operations commander, I explained. My unit handles sensitive missions, often in coordination with intelligence services and diplomatic corps. I can't go into specifics about our operations, but we deal with situations that have significant national security implications. So, like spy stuff? Jason asked, suddenly interested. I smiled. Not exactly, but we do work closely with intelligence officers. Oh, please, Amanda interjected with a laugh. You make it sound like you're in some thriller movie. I'm sure it's mostly paperwork and meetings like any government job. There's certainly administration involved, I acknowledged, but also extensive field operations. Field operations? Amanda repeated with a smirk. Listen to you with all the jargon. Next, you'll be telling us you've saved the world single-handedly. Leave your sister alone, Amanda, my father said, but his tone was indulgent, the way one might scold a child for a charming misbehavior. I'm just teasing, Amanda replied. Besides, I'm sure Rebecca's work is very important in its own way. Not everyone can be saving lives on a daily basis like some of us. The implication was clear. Her work as a doctor had tangible, immediate value. Mine was abstract at best, fabricated at worst. Actually, I began feeling my patience wearing thin. My last mission directly prevented a situation that could have escalated into an international incident with potential casualties in the thousands. My mother looked uncomfortable. Rebecca dear, let's not exaggerate. We know you do important work for the government. I'm not exaggerating, I said firmly. Amanda rolled her eyes. Always so dramatic. Just like when we were kids, and she insisted she could see ghosts in the attic. The table erupted in laughter, and just like that, any serious consideration of my career was dismissed. As the main course dishes were cleared, and dessert was brought out, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. Normally, I wouldn't check messages during a family dinner, but given the nature of my work, I always remained reachable for emergencies. Excusing myself, I stepped into the kitchen to read the text. It was from General Thomas Weber, my commanding officer. Major Harrison, arriving your location 2,000 hours, with documentation for your review, before tomorrow's meeting with Joint Chiefs. Confirmed your family address with base admin. Hope this doesn't disrupt your leave too much. I checked my watch, 7:45 p.m. William Harrison would be here in 15 minutes. This was unexpected, but not entirely surprising. The aftermath of our recent operation was still unfolding, and the briefing for the Joint Chiefs was crucial. Returning to the table, I found Amanda in the middle of yet another story at my expense. And then in college, she actually thought she was going to be recruited for some elite government program. Remember that, Mom? She came home for Christmas break going on and on about how these special agents had approached her. My mother nodded. Oh yes, she was convinced the CIA, or FBI, or some such organization was interested in her. We were worried she was getting involved in something dangerous. What they didn't know, what I had never told them, was that those special agents had indeed been government recruiters, identifying potential candidates for classified programs. That initial contact had led to my specialized track within the Air Force, setting me on the path to my current position. I think Rebecca just watches too many movies, Amanda continued. Always has, living in a fantasy world where she's some kind of hero. Richard, who had been mostly quiet during dinner, frowned slightly at his wife's tone. I think what Rebecca does sounds fascinating. Not everyone's path has to look the same. Amanda shot him a look. Of course not, honey. I'm just saying there's a difference between real-world impact and playing pretend. That was the breaking point. I don't play pretend, Amanda. I said, my voice calm but firm. What I do has real consequences for real people. Just because I can't share the details doesn't make it any less significant. Oh, here we go. With the classified information again, Amanda said with an exaggerated sigh. So convenient that everything important you do is top secret. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. My father looked surprised. Are we expecting anyone else? Maybe it's the neighbors, my mother suggested, rising from her seat. Amanda couldn't resist one final dig. Or maybe it's Rebecca's imaginary achievements coming to visit. As my mother left to answer the door, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I knew exactly who was at the door, and for once timing was on my side. The sound of the front door opening echoed through the house. From the dining room we could hear my mother's confused voice greeting someone, followed by a deep, authoritative male voice responding. Then, footsteps approached the dining room. My mother reappeared in the doorway looking bewildered. Rebecca, there's someone here for you, a military gentleman. Behind her stood Major William Harrison, in his full-dress uniform cap, tucked under his arm, his posture perfect. At 42, Harrison was an imposing figure, his ribbons and medals testament to a distinguished career as a fighter pilot before he joined our specialized unit. For a moment, the dining room was frozen in tableau. My relative staring at the unexpected visitor, Amanda, with her mouth slightly open, my father half risen from his chair. I stood up calmly. Major Harrison, I wasn't expecting you so soon. What happened next would be forever burned into my memory. Harrison stepped into the room, placed his cap on a side table, and came to rigid attention. Then, with precision that would make a drill sergeant proud, he saluted me. Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Mitchell, Special Operations Commander, he announced in a voice that filled the room. I apologize for interrupting your family gathering, ma'am. General Weber sent me with the briefing materials for tomorrow's Joint Chiefs presentation. The silence that followed was absolute. I could practically hear the collective intake of breath around the table. From the corner of my eye, I saw Amanda's smirk vanish, replaced by an expression of stunned disbelief. I returned Harrison's salute. At ease, Major. Thank you for bringing the materials. I wasn't expecting them until tomorrow morning. There have been developments, ma'am. The general felt you should be briefed immediately. I nodded, aware that every eye in the room was fixed on this exchange. Of course. Let's step into my father's study to review the documents. As I turned to lead Harrison out of the dining room, I caught a glimpse of my family's faces. My father looked as if someone had just told him the earth was flat. My mother's hand was pressed to her mouth, and Amanda sat rigid in her chair, her face drained of color. "Excuse us, please," I said to the table at large. "This won't take long." The study was a small room off the main hallway, lined with bookshelves and dominated by a heavy oak desk. I closed the door behind us, and immediately Harrison's formal demeanor relaxed slightly. "Sorry to crash your family dinner, Colonel," he said with a hint of a smile. "General's orders." "It's fine, Will. Actually, your timing couldn't have been better." He raised an eyebrow. "Family tensions running high." "You could say that." I didn't elaborate. Despite our close working relationship, I rarely discussed my family issues with colleagues. "What's the situation?" Harrison opened his briefcase and removed a sealed folder. "The operation aftermath has some complications. The intelligence we recovered has implications beyond what we initially anticipated. The Joint Chiefs want a comprehensive breakdown of not just what happened, but what it means for ongoing operations in the region." For the next 20 minutes, we reviewed the documents, discussing strategy and approach for the next day's meeting. It was familiar territory for us, the kind of high-level planning that had become routine in our work together. As we concluded, Harrison repacked his briefcase. "There's a car waiting to take us to the airfield tomorrow, at 0800. We'll fly directly to Washington." "I'll be ready," I assured him. Before opening the door, Harrison paused. "By the way, Colonel, the President specifically mentioned your leadership in the Situation Room yesterday. Said your team's extraction plan was exemplary." I allowed myself a small smile. The team performed admirably. I'll pass along the commendation. When we returned to the dining room, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. The animated dinner conversation had been replaced by hushed whispers that stopped abruptly when we entered. "Everything all right, Rebecca?" my father asked, his voice uncharacteristically tentative. "Yes, just some work matters to address." I turned to Harrison. "Major, can I offer you some coffee or dessert before you go?" "No thank you, ma'am. I should report back to the general." Harrison nodded respectfully to my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, congratulations on your anniversary. You've raised an exceptional daughter. The Air Force is fortunate to have her leadership." My mother, looking slightly dazed, managed a polite, "Thank you, Major." Harrison turned to me and saluted again. "I'll see you at 0800, Colonel." I returned the salute. 0800, Major. Drive safely." After Harrison left, I returned to my seat at the table. The dessert plates sat untouched, the conversation stillborn. All eyes were on me, expressions ranging from shock to confusion to, in Uncle Robert's case, undisguised pride. Amanda was the first to break the silence. "Lieutenant Colonel," she said, her voice slightly higher than normal. "Special Operations Commander. Since when?" "The promotion to Lieutenant Colonel was last year," I replied calmly, picking up my dessert fork. "I've been commanding the Special Operations Unit for about 8 months now." "But that's a very high rank," my father said, as if trying to process this information. "Yes, it is," Uncle Robert interjected. "It's a hell of an achievement, especially at Rebecca's age. You should be proud, James." My father nodded slowly. "Yes, of course, we are." But his expression said otherwise. He looked bewildered, as if he suddenly found himself sitting across from a stranger. "What exactly does a Special Operations Commander do?" Cousin Stephanie asked, genuine interest in her voice. Before I could answer, Amanda cut in. "Does it matter? Clearly it's all very important, and classified." Her tone had shifted from mockery to something more complex, a mixture of disbelief and defensiveness. "Actually, I can explain the general nature of my role without compromising security," I said, meeting her gaze steadily. "My unit conducts specialized missions that often involve coordination between military branches and intelligence agencies. We operate in sensitive situations that have direct implications for national security. The recent mission that Major Harrison referred to prevented a diplomatic crisis that could have had serious consequences. "The one you were trying to tell us about at dinner?" Richard said, giving his wife a pointed look. Amanda flushed. "How was I supposed to know? You never talk about your work in any detail." "Because most of it is classified, Amanda," I replied evenly, "as I've tried to explain many times." An awkward silence fell over the table. My mother, ever the social director, attempted to salvage the situation. "Well, this is all very impressive, Rebecca. We had no idea you had risen so high in your field." She gestured vaguely as if the military was some obscure hobby, rather than one of the nation's most vital institutions. "Thank you, Mom," I said, deciding to accept the clumsy acknowledgement for what it was, a first step. As the dessert plates were cleared and coffee was served, the conversation gradually resumed, though with a markedly different tone. Family members who had previously ignored me now directed questions my way. My father, recovering from his initial shock, began explaining to others at the table what he thought my rank signified, getting most of the details wrong, but making an effort nonetheless. Through it all, Amanda remained uncharacteristically quiet, her expression clouded. Occasionally, I would catch her watching me with an intensity that suggested she was re-evaluating everything she thought she knew about her younger sister. The evening was drawing to a close when my phone vibrated again. Checking it discreetly, I saw another message from General Weber Harrison: confirmed documents delivered. Car arriving 0730 tomorrow. Uniform required for Joint Chiefs. I looked up to find Amanda's eyes on me. For the first time that evening, possibly for the first time in years, she was looking at me not with condescension or dismissal, but with something approaching uncertainty. The scales had shifted. The family dynamics that had been set in stone since childhood had been disrupted by the reality of who I had become. It was a breaking point not just for how they saw me, but for how I would relate to them going forward. As guests began to say their goodbyes, I excused myself to pack for the next day's departure. I had a meeting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff to prepare for, after all. My family's recognition, while satisfying in the moment, was secondary to the responsibilities awaiting me. Yet as I climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom, I couldn't help but feel that something fundamental had changed. The invisible barriers that had defined my place in the family had been breached. What would replace them remained to be seen. After the guests departed, the house fell into an uneasy quiet. I had finished packing my small duffel bag and was reviewing some of the documents Harrison had brought when there was a soft knock at my bedroom door. "Come in," I called, closing the folder and setting it aside. My father entered, looking uncomfortable in a way I had rarely seen him. James Mitchell was a man accustomed to certainty, to knowing his place in the world, and everyone else's, for tonight that certainty had been shaken. "Do you have a moment?" he asked, hovering near the doorway. "Of course." I gestured to the chair by the desk. He sat down, his movements stiff. For a long moment he said nothing, just studied me, as if seeing me for the first time. "Lieutenant Colonel," he finally said, testing the words. "That's quite significant, isn't it?" "Yes, it is." "And this Special Operations Unit, you command its important work." "Very important, Dad." He nodded slowly. "The way that Major looked at you, the way he spoke to you, I've never seen anyone treat you with that kind of respect before." The unintended revelation in that statement hit me hard. Had no one in my family ever shown me real respect? Had I been so diminished in their eyes that the basic professional courtesy between officers seemed extraordinary? "Military protocol is very structured," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Major Harrison is an exceptional officer with an impressive record of his own. We've worked together on several critical missions." Another silence stretched between us. "Rebecca, I think I owe you an apology," my father finally said, the words seeming to cost him considerable effort. "We all do, but especially me. I never took your career seriously. I thought you were just I don't know playing at being a soldier. I know what you thought, I replied, keeping my voice level. You made it clear every time we spoke. He winced. That's fair. I suppose we've been dismissive of your choices for a long time. He paused, struggling with what to say next. Your mother and we had certain expectations. When Amanda followed the path, we envisioned it was easy to assume that was the right path, the only path to success. There are many paths to a meaningful life, Dad. Yes, I'm beginning to see that. He looked around the room at the teenage remnants of the daughter he thought he knew. This work you do, these missions, are they dangerous? I considered lying to spare him worry, but decided on honesty. Sometimes yes, but I'm well trained as is my team. We take calculated risks when necessary. He paled slightly but nodded. And this meeting tomorrow, with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that's with the highest-ranking military officers in the country. Yes, they want a briefing on the implications of our recent operation. Good Lord, he murmured more to himself than to me. My daughter briefing the Joint Chiefs. He looked up, his expression a mix of confusion and dawning pride. Why didn't you tell us about your promotion? About the importance of your position? I tried, Dad. Many times. But no one wanted to hear it. After a while I stopped trying. The truth of this statement seemed to hit him hard. He sat back in the chair, his face showing the first signs of genuine remorse I had ever seen from him. We should have listened, he said simply. Before I could respond, there was another knock at the door. My mother stood there with Amanda, slightly behind her. James, is everything all right? My mother asked, her eyes moving between us. Yes, Eleanor. Rebecca and I were just talking about her work. He stood up, making room as my mother and sister entered the bedroom. The four of us had not been together in this room since I was a teenager. It felt strange, this impromptu family meeting in the space that had witnessed so many of my private disappointments. That Major Harrison, my mother, began. He seemed very impressed with you. We work well together, I said. He's an excellent officer. And he called you a colonel, she continued. That's quite high up, isn't it? Lieutenant Colonel the First corrected gently. Yes, it's a senior rank. Why didn't you tell us? Amanda asked suddenly, her voice lacking its usual confidence. All these years you've barely mentioned promotions or what you actually do. I did tell you, Amanda. All of you. I sent letters, I made calls. I tried to share my accomplishments during visits. But no one ever seemed interested or impressed. So eventually, I stopped mentioning it. That's not fair, Amanda protested. But there was little conviction in her voice. You were always so vague, always saying everything was classified. Much of it is classified. But the promotions, the increasing responsibility, the significance of the work, those things I tried to share. Remember, when I called after taking command of the unit, you asked if I had met anyone interesting lately, then told me all about your new kitchen renovation, without waiting for an answer. Amanda had the grace to look embarrassed. I didn't realize it was important. That's just it, I said, feeling years of suppressed frustration, finally finding voice. Nothing I did ever seemed important to any of you, unless it fit your narrow definition of success. Medical school, marriage, children, house in the right neighborhood, those were the only achievements that counted. My mother looked stricken. That's not true, Rebecca. We've always been proud of you. Have you, Mom? When was the last time you asked me about my work with genuine interest? When did you ever tell family friends about my accomplishments, the way you constantly talked about Amanda's practice or her children's achievements? My mother had no answer. The man who was just here, I continued, Major Harrison, is one of the most decorated pilots in the Air Force. He's flown combat missions, rescued hostages, and coordinated airstrikes that have saved countless lives. And he salutes me. He follows my orders because he respects my rank and my abilities. The general who sent him answers directly to the Secretary of Defense. Tomorrow I'll be briefing the highest military council in the nation about an operation I led that prevented a potential international crisis. The room was silent as my family absorbed this. I never needed you to understand the classified details of my work. I just wanted you to respect that what I do matters, that I've built a career I'm proud of, that I've earned my place in an institution that values excellence and service above all else. My father cleared his throat. We should have done better, Rebecca. I should have done better. Yes, you should have. I agreed, not unkindly. But it's not too late to start. Amanda had been unusually quiet, standing slightly apart from our parents. Now she moved closer, her expression unreadable. The president, she said slowly. Has the president heard of you? Of your work? It was such an Amanda question, focusing on status and recognition, that I almost laughed, but I answered truthfully. Yes, the president is briefed on all operations at my unit's level. According to Major Harrison, the president specifically commended my leadership in the Situation Room yesterday. Amanda's eyes widened. For someone who had spent her life cultivating local prestige and professional recognition, the idea that her little sister had the ear of the nation's highest office was clearly paradigm-shifting. I had no idea, she whispered. All this time I thought you were just what, Amanda? I don't know. Less than me, I guess. The admission seemed to surprise her as much as it did me. You were always the little sister, always following in my footsteps, always a step behind. When you joined the military, instead of pursuing what I considered a prestigious career, I thought you were settling. I never imagined you'd rise so high. You never asked, I said simply. The four of us stood in silence, the weight of years of misunderstanding and dismissal hanging between us. It was my mother who finally spoke. Well, things will be different now, she declared with the same decisive tone she used when planning charity galas. We'll have a proper celebration when you return from Washington. We'll invite everyone. You can wear your uniform with all your medals. I suppressed a sigh. She still didn't quite get it. Mom, I don't need a celebration. I don't need public recognition from the family. What I've always wanted was simply for you to see me, to value my choices and achievements on their own terms, not compared to some preset idea of success. Oh, she said, deflating slightly. Yes, of course. But I appreciate the thought, I added, not wanting to dismiss her attempt, however, misguided at making amends. My father checked his watch. It's getting late, and Rebecca has an early start tomorrow. He turned to me. What time is your car coming? 7:30. He nodded. I'll make sure coffee is ready before you leave. It was a small gesture, but from my father it felt significant. As they prepared to leave the room, Amanda lingered behind. When our parents had gone, she turned to me. I've been horrible to you, haven't I? She asked softly. You've been condescending and dismissive, I agreed, especially today. She didn't deny it. I think I needed to believe my choices were the only right ones, that my path was superior. It made me feel secure in my decisions. We all make different choices, Amanda. That doesn't make mine less valid or less successful than yours. I see that now. She hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, I am proud of you. I just didn't understand what there was to be proud of until tonight. It wasn't a complete apology, but from Amanda, it was a significant concession. Thank you, I said. That means something. After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, processing the evening's events. The revelation of my rank and position had forced my family to reconsider their perceptions of me. But whether this newfound respect would last, whether it would develop into genuine understanding and appreciation, remained to be seen. One thing was certain: I would never again allow myself to be diminished in their eyes. I had earned my place in the world with or without their recognition. That knowledge, more than their belated admiration, was what I would carry with me to Washington the next day. Morning came early. I was up at 5:30, showered, and dressed in my full-service uniform by 6:15. The house was quiet as I made my way downstairs, expecting to find the kitchen empty. Instead, I found my father at the stove, coffee brewing, and pancakes cooking on the griddle. "Dad, you're up early." He turned, seeming almost embarrassed to be caught in this uncharacteristic act of attentiveness. "Thought you might want a proper breakfast before your big meeting." The simple kindness caught me off guard. "Thank you. That's thoughtful." We settled into a strangely comfortable silence as he finished cooking, and I poured coffee for both of us. The pancakes were slightly burned on one side, a reminder that kitchen duties had never been my father's domain. "I used to make these for you girls on Saturday mornings," he said as we sat down at the kitchen table. "Do you remember?" I remember, I said, surprised that he did. Those Saturday morning breakfasts had ended when I was around 10, discontinued when my father's law practice became busier. Amanda always wanted blueberries in hers. "And you always wanted chocolate chips," he said with a small smile. "Your mother hated that I gave you chocolate for breakfast." This shared recollection of a simpler time in our family life created a momentary bridge between us. "Rebecca," he began, setting down his coffee cup, "I want you to know that I've been thinking about our conversation last night, about how I failed to recognize the significance of your career." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Coming from my father, who I had never heard apologize to anyone, the words held extraordinary weight. "Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. I'd like to understand more about what you do," he continued. "Not the classified parts, obviously, but the general nature of your work, your responsibilities, if you're willing to share." For the next 20 minutes, I explained in broad terms the structure of my unit, the types of missions we undertook, and the leadership role I had developed. My father listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than skepticism. As we were finishing, my mother appeared in the doorway, also fully dressed despite the early hour. "I thought I heard voices," she said, joining us at the table. "Rebecca, do you have everything you need for your trip?" "Yes, Mom. The car will be here soon." She nodded, fidgeting slightly with her coffee cup. "Your father and I have been talking. We realize we haven't been as supportive of your career as we should have been." "Mom, it's okay. We don't need to have this conversation right now." "No, I need to say this." She straightened in her chair, assuming the dignified posture she used for difficult conversations. "We were wrong to measure your success against Amanda's. Your paths are different but equally valuable. I hope you can forgive our short-sightedness." The earnestness in her voice touched me. "Of course I forgive you, Mom." She seemed relieved. "Good. That's good." After a moment she added, "Perhaps, when you return, you could tell us more about your work. Within the limits of what you're allowed to share, of course." "I'd like that," I said, realizing I genuinely meant it. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway signaled the arrival of my transportation to the airfield. "That's my ride," I said, standing up. My parents walked me to the door, where my father surprised me by pulling me into a proper hug, not the perfunctory embrace he usually offered. "Be safe," he said gruffly, "and let us know when you're back." "I will." As I turned to leave, I saw Amanda coming down the stairs, also fully dressed despite the early hour. Our eyes met, and I realized we needed to have our own conversation before I left. "Give me a minute," I told the driver, who nodded and returned to the car. My parents, sensing that Amanda and I needed privacy, discreetly retreated to the kitchen. "You're leaving already?" Amanda asked, reaching the bottom of the stairs. "Duty calls. Joint Chiefs don't like to be kept waiting." She nodded, an awkward silence falling between us. Despite last night's conversation, there was still so much unresolved. "Amanda, I'm not going to pretend that years of dismissal and condescension can be erased in a single evening," I began. "I know," she said quickly. "I don't expect that. But I am willing to try to build a better relationship going forward if you are." She looked relieved. "I am. Definitely." Then, with uncharacteristic hesitation, she added, "I've been thinking about why I treated you the way I did. It wasn't just about believing my choices were the right ones. What was it then? I think I was jealous, she admitted, the words seeming to cost her considerable effort. Jealous of what you had. Everything, Amanda. The perfect career, the perfect family, our parents' constant approval. I had the life I was expected to have, she corrected. The path laid out for me from childhood. But you, Rebecca, you created your own path. You had the courage to choose something different, something that called to you. She sighed. I never even considered alternatives. I just followed the plan. Are you saying you regret your choices? I asked, genuinely surprised. No, not exactly. I love my children, I'm proud of my practice. But sometimes, I wonder what else I might have been capable of, what other directions my life could have taken, if I'd been brave enough to explore them. She met my eyes directly. You were brave in a way I never was. I think that's why I needed to believe your choices were wrong, that you were less successful than me. Because if your different path led to fulfillment and achievement, what did that say about my unquestioning acceptance of the expected route? It was the most honest conversation we had ever had, this acknowledgement of the complex emotions that had shaped our relationship for decades. I never thought of it that way, I admitted. I always believed you looked down on me because you genuinely thought your life was superior. Part of me did think that, she acknowledged. But deep down I envied your freedom, your willingness to disappoint others, to be true to yourself. The car horn sounded gently, reminding me of the waiting driver. I have to go, I said. I know, but when you get back, she hesitated. Maybe we could have dinner, just the two of us. I'd like that. She surprised me by stepping forward and hugging me, a genuine embrace, rather than the formal air kiss she usually offered at family gatherings. Be safe out there, Becca, she said, using the childhood nickname she had abandoned when we became teenagers. And know that at least one person in this family is genuinely, unreservedly proud of you. As I settled into the back seat of the government car, I felt a curious lightness. The weight of familial disappointment and misunderstanding that I had carried for so long had begun to lift. There was still much to resolve, many conversations to be had, but a foundation for a new type of relationship had been laid. Major Harrison was waiting at the airfield, standing beside the small jet that would take us to Washington. He saluted as I approached. Good morning, Colonel. Ready for the Joint Chiefs? As ready as I'll ever be, Major. As we boarded the aircraft, Harrison asked, How was the rest of your evening with the family? Better after my dramatic entrance? I smiled, thinking of the conversations that had followed his departure. Actually, yes, much better. Glad to hear it, ma'am. He handed me a folder with the final briefing materials. General Weber sends his regards. He also mentioned that the Secretary of State will be joining the meeting. As the jet prepared for takeoff, I found myself reflecting on the stark contrast between my professional world, where my authority and expertise were unquestioned, and my family world, where recognition had come so late, and with such difficulty. Yet, even that was changing now. The revelation of my true rank and responsibilities had forced a re-evaluation that was long overdue. More importantly, it had opened the door to more honest communication, to the possibility of relationships based on mutual respect, rather than outdated perceptions. As the aircraft lifted into the morning sky, I felt as if I too was rising above old limitations, old hurts. The confrontations of the past 24 hours had been difficult but necessary, creating space for new understanding, and perhaps genuine connection with the family I had always felt separate from. Whether these changes would last remained to be seen, but for the first time in years I felt hopeful about the possibility of being both Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, respected commander, and Rebecca, valued daughter and sister. The mission awaiting me in Washington demanded my full attention now, but when it was complete, I would return to continue the equally important work of rebuilding family bonds that had been strained for far too long. 3 months after the family reunion, I stood on a stage at Andrews Air Force Base facing a crowd of military personnel and civilian dignitaries. The Secretary of Defense had just presented me with the Distinguished Service Medal, for the mission that had been the subject of so much discussion during that fateful family dinner. As I stepped away from the podium after my brief acceptance speech, my eyes found the small group seated in the special family section of the audience. There were my parents looking proud and slightly overwhelmed by the military pageantry. Beside them sat Amanda and Richard, and to my surprise, Uncle Robert and Cousin Stephanie had made the trip as well. The ceremony concluded with the traditional military precision, and as the crowd dispersed, my family made their way toward me. My father reached me first, his face showing an emotion I had rarely seen there, unguarded pride. "That was quite something, Rebecca," he said, his voice gruff with feeling. My mother was more expressive, pulling me into a hug despite the formality of my uniform. "We are so proud of you, dear. So very proud." Amanda hung back slightly, allowing our parents their moment. When she finally approached, her usual polished confidence was tempered with a new respect. "Congratulations, Rebecca," she said, embracing me warmly. "Though I'm not surprised. You've always been exceptional, even when I refused to see it." The 3 months since the family reunion had brought significant changes to our relationship. True to her word, Amanda had invited me to dinner when I returned from Washington. That evening had been the beginning of a more honest relationship between us, one where we were learning to appreciate each other's different strengths and choices. "Thank you all for coming," I said, genuinely moved by their presence. "It means a lot to have you here." Major Harrison approached now in his role as my executive officer. "Colonel Mitchell, the reception is ready whenever you are." "Thank you, Major. Please lead the way." As we followed Harrison to the officers' club where the reception was being held, I noticed my father taking in the deferential way the other officers treated me, the respectful nods and salutes as we passed. "This is your world," he said quietly, falling into step beside me, "and I can see now that you've mastered it completely. It took time, Dad, just like anything worthwhile." At the reception, I watched with a mixture of amusement and gratification as my family interacted with my colleagues and superiors. My mother, always socially adept, was deep in conversation with the base commander's wife. Richard was asking thoughtful questions about military technology to a group of officers who seemed impressed by his genuine interest. And Amanda, to my surprise, was listening attentively as Catherine Jensen, one of my unit captains, explained the rigorous training program for special operations personnel. General Weber approached me, champagne flute in hand. "Your family seems wonderful, Colonel Mitchell. Hard to believe you're the same officer who once told me she'd rather face a hostile extraction than attend her family reunion." I laughed. "People change, sir. Families too, apparently." "Indeed they do." He nodded toward Amanda. "Your sister seems particularly engaged." "She's making an effort," I acknowledged. "We both are." After the reception, my family and I returned to my apartment in Arlington. It was the first time they had visited my home, a fact that highlighted how separate my personal and family lives had been until recently. As we settled in the living room with coffee, Amanda asked the question that I could see had been on her mind throughout the ceremony. "That medal today, it was for the mission you were telling us about at dinner that night, wasn't it? The one I dismissed as exaggeration." "Yes, it was." She shook her head, a rueful smile on her face. "I was such an idiot." "You didn't know," I said, finding forgiveness easier than I had expected. "None of you did, partly because I stopped trying to tell you." "Which was our fault," my mother interjected. "We should have listened better." The conversation flowed more freely than it ever had in our family, touching on my work, the unclassified parts, their lives, and the shared past that had shaped us all. For the first time, I felt neither defensive about my choices nor eager for their approval. I had found a quiet confidence in my identity that existed independently of their validation. Later, as my parents prepared to leave for their hotel, my father pulled me aside. "I want you to know something, Rebecca," he said. His usual authoritative tone softened. "I was wrong about many things, but especially about your choice to join the military. I thought it was beneath you, beneath our family's standards." He shook his head. "What arrogance! What foolishness! You found your calling, your purpose, and pursued it with extraordinary determination. I couldn't be more proud of the woman you've become." The words I had longed to hear for so many years finally came, and yet I found they didn't carry the weight I had once assigned them. I was grateful for his recognition, but I no longer needed it to validate my worth. "Thank you, Dad. That means a lot to me." After my parents left, Amanda lingered, helping me clean up the coffee cups. "They've changed," she observed. "Both of them. I've never seen Dad so reflective, so willing to admit he was wrong." "People can surprise you," I replied, "if you give them the chance." She looked at me thoughtfully. "You've changed too. You seem more at peace." "I am, partly because of the recognition at work, but mostly because I've finally accepted that my value doesn't depend on anyone else's approval, not even our families." Amanda nodded slowly. "That's the lesson I'm still learning. My whole life has been built around meeting expectations, earning approval." She sighed. "It's a hard habit to break." "But worth breaking," I said gently. "There's freedom in defining success on your own terms." "Freedom," she repeated, as if testing the concept. "I think I'm starting to understand what drew you to your path different as it is from mine." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The old competitive tension between us dissolved into something more nuanced, more respectful. The night Major Harrison showed up, Amanda said suddenly, "I was so shocked, so completely blindsided by the reality of who you had become. But what really got to me wasn't the rank or the respect he showed you." "What was it then?" "It was the absolute certainty you projected. The way you stood, the way you spoke, like someone who knows exactly who they are and what they're capable of." She smiled ruefully. "I've spent my whole life checking boxes, meeting external measures of success, and yet I've never felt that kind of certainty about myself." "It didn't come easily," I admitted. "It took years of testing myself, of facing challenges, and sometimes failing, of learning to trust my judgment even when others questioned it." "I envy that," she said simply, "but I'm also inspired by it." As Amanda prepared to leave, we embraced with a new ease the old tensions and resentments, giving way to the possibility of a genuine sisterhood, one based on mutual respect rather than competition or comparison. In the months that followed, our family continued the work of rebuilding relationships on healthier foundations. My parents made an effort to learn about and understand my career. Amanda and I developed a friendship that had never existed in our childhood, discovering common ground we had never thought to look for. The healing process wasn't always smooth. Old patterns occasionally resurfaced. Old hurts were sometimes inadvertently reopened. But the fundamental shift in perception that had begun that night at the family dinner had created space for growth and change that benefited us all. For my part, I found that as my family's recognition became less important to my sense of self-worth, I was paradoxically more able to enjoy their support when it came. The validation I had once craved now felt like a welcome addition to, rather than the foundation of my identity. One evening, 6 months after the medal ceremony, I received a call from Amanda. "I just wanted to let you know," she said, sounding excited. "I've decided to start a new program at the hospital, providing specialized care for veterans. I was hoping you might advise me on the specific needs of military personnel returning from deployment." It was a small thing, perhaps, this request for my professional input, but it represented a profound change in how she viewed me, my expertise, and the value of my experiences. "I'd be happy to help," I told her. "That's a wonderful initiative, Amanda." "I got the idea after talking to some of your colleagues at the ceremony," she explained. "It made me realize there was a gap in our services that I could help fill, using my skills but informed by your world. Our worlds, once so separate, were beginning to intersect in ways that enriched us both." The greatest lesson I took from this journey was not about family validation or professional recognition, important as those things can be. It was about the quiet strength that comes from defining your own path and walking it with integrity regardless of who notices or approves. My sister had mocked me in front of everyone, Yes. The pilot had stood at attention and saluted me, revealing a truth my family had been unable or unwilling to see. But the most significant change hadn't been in how they saw me, but in how I saw myself, not as the family disappointment seeking approval, but as a woman of accomplishment and purpose, offering connection to those willing to meet me as an equal. Family wounds run deep, and their healing is rarely complete or perfect. But in acknowledging the pain, confronting the misunderstandings, and choosing to move forward with honesty and compassion, we had all found a measure of freedom from the roles and expectations that had confined us for so long. That more than any medal or promotion was the true victory. Have you ever felt underestimated by your family, or had a moment where they finally saw your true worth? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be struggling with family acceptance. Remember, your value is not determined by others' recognition of it, but by the integrity and purpose with which you live your life. Thank you for watching, and may you find the courage to stand in your truth even when those closest to you fail to see it.